going to show you how to crochet the brioche stitch. Now this is worked vertically rather than horizontally like most crochet patterns. It actually works up and down the length of the piece that you're crocheting. So we're going to start with the usual chain. So I'll just find my end. Okay, so start with a slip knot as usual, and then we're just going to chain the correct number of stitches. Now I'm going to crochet 99 in my chain for a headband, but obviously that will just depend on your pattern. So just keep crocheting your chain as normal until it's the right length. I finished my crochet chain. Now we're going to flip this over and we're going to work in these little back bumps. If you haven't worked in the back bumps before, I'll put a link to a separate video that explains how to do this. So I'm going to skip this first back bump and then I'm going to do a slip stitch in the second one. So if we just pop our hook in there, oops, and we're just going to yarn over and pull through. And then I'm not going to pull this tight, so you can see there's a nice amount of slack on there. So both stitches are kind of the same height. And then we're just going to pull that through. And that's your first slip stitch. So you might want to pop a marker in that one. And now we're going to do something called a yarn over slip stitch. And it is just as it sounds, you yarn over. And then you insert your hook into the next back bump. Oops, these can always be a little bit tight on the first row. There we go. And then I'm going to yarn over and pull through. Now you can carry on and yarn over and pull through, but because of the position of this middle stitch, the hook can often get caught on it. So the easiest thing to do is, again, I'm keeping my slack on there so all the stitches are the same height, and I'm turning my hook to the back and pulling through. So we'll do that again. Yarn over, insert into the next back bump, pull a loop through, turn your hook to the back and just pull that through. And we're going to carry on doing the yarn over slip stitch all the way along this chain. Pull through. Remember to keep the slack on these, so all the stitches, if you pull them up, should be the same height. And then we're turning our hook to the back and pulling through. Yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull through, turn, make sure you've got the slack, turn your hook to the back and pull through. And we'll just keep doing that until you get to the end of the row. I've finished the setup row of yarn over slip stitches, and this is what it should look like. And now I'm going to chain one and just give that a little tighten, and then I'm going to turn and I'm going to do a row of slip stitches now, but I'm going to do them in the back loop. So if you look at the top of the V of the first stitch, I'm going to put my hook down between the V and out just under the back loop and pull up a loop. Now I'm going to do this slowly at first, and it's probably quite helpful if you're new to doing rows and rows of slip stitches to do this first and just be careful of your tension, because if you do your slip stitches too tight, it will distort the piece and also be really difficult for you to crochet into. So what you want is for the stitches to kind of be the same height, so you want a little bit of slack in there. So I've pulled my loop through and now I'm just going to pull it through that first loop, and I'm going to go back into the next stitch, so into the back loop of the next stitch, and pull my loop through. Again, just make sure that it's loose, pull it through, and just keep working along like that through the back loop, just making sure that we keep this loose. When I say loose, you don't want it baggy, you just want to keep the loops, the stitches the same size, and not tight. So obviously as you get going and you get faster at this, you won't need to kind of pause to pull them up, but I would recommend that if it's something that you're new to doing. So if you just carry on working along that back loop, doing your slip stitches. So I've completed my row of back loop slip stitches, and this is what it should look like on the right side, and that's what it should look like on the wrong side. Now I'm going to again chain one at the end of the row, and just, if you tension the yarn and just give your hook a wiggle, that'll tighten the chain one. And I'm going to work into the back loop again. Now this is a yarn over slip stitch row, but I like to put a slip stitch in the first and last stitch of the row, just to keep this a bit neater and stop the end flaring, but that's personal preference. So I'm going to start with a slip stitch, again keeping it loose in this first stitch. And this stitch can sometimes, when you come back down, be a little bit difficult to spot. So I'm just going to pop a stitch marker in. There we go. Right. Okay, so now we're doing our yarn over slip stitch in the back loop. So yarn over, insert into the back loop, draw the loop through, check your tension, turn the hook to the back, and pull this through. Yarn over, pull through, slip stitch through, back loop, and oops, pull through. So we're just working a yarn over slip stitch in the back loop all the way along this row until we get to the last stitch, and then we're going to do a slip stitch in the end. So just keep repeating those two rows, the slip stitch row and the yarn over slip stitch row, and then after a while this should be what your piece looks like. So you can see it's totally reversible. It's very stretchy that way, slightly stretchy that way, but not as much, and you get these nice ribbed rows that looks like brioche knitting. Now the ones on the yarn over slip stitch side are slightly narrower, so I do prefer the slip stitch side as my main side, but it really doesn't matter. So just keep repeating those two rows, and there you have your brioche crochet.